of, thank you to the PDF Association for this opportunity to talk to you all. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you had a nice lunch. It's a real pleasure to be here in the National Archives. What an amazingly beautiful building, huh? And my favorite document, the Lee Resolution. If you're not familiar with it, it is really fundamental to everything we've got going here in the United States. I recommend you take a look at that. So what we're going to talk about this afternoon, of course, is PDF, its application to the transactional space. That's the space that involves mailing high volumes of highly personalized content to people, typically consumers. Your credit card statements, your insurance policies, notices like your jury summons. I know you all like to get those things. And without further ado, we'll move on and talk a little bit about how PDF applies to that and how it's revolutionizing the space. Now, those of you who went out and purchased a postage stamp in the last week probably noticed something really important. They're more expensive, right? They went up a penny. And that penny means that all those stamps you bought in December, hoping to do an incredibly large mailing to your close personal friends, well, that was the best investment you've made recently, because better than a savings account, you've made over 2% return on that investment. Well, it's an amazing what a nickel and dime business can add up to be for the United States Postal Service. With just 5% of the world's population, it delivers 50% of all the mail volume in the world. The United States Postal Service has more brick and mortar outlets than Walmart and Starbucks and McDonald's combined. It employs more than 500,000 people, and the derivative industry that follows from that employs 15 times that number. So mailing is a huge business in the United States, critically important to our success as an economy. But it's not just postage. Postage is definitely the most expensive part of mailing. But all these other ingredients go into making mailing in high volumes expensive. And the USPS recognizes that, and so it gives incentives to people, organizations like your utility, pick your favorite bank, even school districts, to do mailing in high concentrations. So it set up these things called area distribution centers. And the more mail that you deliver in an area distribution center, the lower the cost of delivering any one of those pieces. Now, one of the amazing things about the United States postal structure is that you can send a letter from Pago Pago to San Juan for 50 cents. But obviously, no postal service can make money doing that. And when you deal with nickels and dimes, you need to create incredible volumes. And so encouraging people to mail in high volumes is one of the things the USPS is very good at. In fact, so good that there are large organizations set up to sort mail using big machines like this. These really fill factory floors. Now, you can imagine this is very expensive equipment. And one of the really interesting things about PDF is that its capabilities, as I'll get into in a short bit, allow organizations to do this kind of work purely digitally. These are very expensive machines to maintain, not alone just to construct. But having PDF is helping a lot of organizations solve very practical problems that make their mailing much more efficient and economical. Okay, so these are a couple of examples of letters I received recently. And you can see that these were virtually identical. If you were to pick these up, put them on a scale, they weighed the same amount. They were the same size envelope, a 6x9. And yet you can see the difference in postage was 3 cents. Now, if you're HealthNet and you mail about 6 million of these things multiple times a year, one mailing you could save just by the difference in those two envelopes is about $180,000. So multiplied by 4, if you do it quarterly, that's 720, and then you do it for 10 years, it were some really big money. Okay, let's backtrack a smidge and talk about how your bills get produced. Typically, an organization that produces bills or outsources it relies on software called composition software. And a key component of that software is going to be something called a designer that allows you to set up the template for the document. That template is the pretty parts of the document and some fill-in-the-blank areas where the variable data goes. And that variable data is assigned by rules. So it's a very sophisticated operation, but it's, in essence, very similar to Word. Then another part of the organization would be responsible for managing the data sets. Those individuals, recipients that are aligned with a line of business and a specific document generated by that line of business. And that subset of the organization responsible for the data set is going to also probably do some cleansing and pre-sorting of that data. The reason for pre-sorting is you get the postal discounts. Then once you have the template and the data, you put it into the composition engine, which applies the rules, and voila, you get a document. Now remember that step there, this kind of space between the composition and the proofing, because further down the road here in the talk, we'll come back to that because it's a critical insertion point for where PDF goes. Obviously, before you put this stuff to print, you want to make sure it's what you want to print, and then voila, off to your fleet of printers. And then after that, you don't typically have a lot of people sitting around putting letters into envelopes because that's a good way to get a lot of paper cuts. And nobody wants those kind of worker comp claims, right? So you have big machines, kind of like those ones in the previous picture, that mechanically put letters into envelopes. And then from there, an amazing amount of magic happens. People push pallets of letters over a line on the ground, and then it's mailed. And sometime later, the Postal Service comes and picks it up, and voila, it goes out the door. But, and this is where PDF comes in, that's not how a huge amount of content actually gets produced. Some parts of those steps get broken along the way. For example, the composition system may not be able to get a data set that's been pre-sorted, or you might need different envelope sizes for a particular line of business. The production may be geographically distributed, so you might print in San Diego, you might print in New York, and it's kind of hard to move the paper around, so you do it digitally. Also, the way your systems work, you may have very small batches of, or small files, created files of relatively few numbers of recipients in a batch because stuff might be done at fixed time intervals where the batches can't grow, whatever. So introduce PDF and the magic it provides to solve some of these problems that really add up to the differences in the mailing costs, for example, in the HealthNet versus Wells Fargo application I showed you there. So what PDF fundamentally does that's really important is it applies this process of normalization to data. It provides page independence, but not just page independence, also device independence. And device independence is really important because when you look at a PDF, you trust that's what's going to come out when you print that, correct? But it also has rules for embedding resources and other information that make sure that wherever you send that document, it's going to come out the way you want. That process of normalization then leads to a lot of benefits in the mailing process that save money. Suppression, where you don't have to mail things to people that just want it electronically. Pre-sorting content that couldn't be pre-sorted or after it's been merged with other content because it's been normalized. Eliminating envelopes because now you can put content that was intended for different envelopes into the same envelope because, hey, all the checks are coming to me. Why put them in a different envelope? Just send them to me in one. I'm happy with that. Small jobs can be batched into larger jobs so that they run more efficiently on equipment and can be scheduled for times when you have available resources. And commingling content that wouldn't have normally been processed together, but in fact, because of information you now can process digitally, can be handled in a purely electronic form versus that big machine I showed you back on slide 4 or 5. Okay. Now, PDF is... let me back up for just 1 second here. Remember that slide back here, right there? The problem with the existing model for a lot of organizations is that they produce data streams that really don't have that normalization quality about them inherently. They're producing stuff like line data or PostScript or AFPDS. And so if you insert between this composition step and the proofing step something that gets it to PDF, or you simply create PDF right off the bat from the composition step, then you're in a much better position to handle these processes of optimization that come right here. And so this is all about the benefit of PDF versus other conventional, traditional models for handling transactional content. Now, the first bit of this, the importance of quality assurance and what PDF does for us. As PDF has exploded onto the printing landscape, it's brought with it something really important, which is color fidelity. People really want color fidelity, and if you're an organization whose brand depends on a specific color, the new capabilities in PDF 2.0 for controlling that color are critical for your marketing plan, your branding. All right. Now, PDF, as a result of it being digital, allows softwares to support these organizations with automation workflows that help to validate some of the things like the fonts and colors that are used, the sizes of media that are applied, and the amount of ink that gets used, because in the current landscape, the state of the art, inkjet workflows are becoming pervasive. The take-up curve on inkjet technology is hyperbolic. So where 10 years ago there was virtually none, now it's state of the art. It's what everybody expects to have available to them when they go shopping their content to be printed, whether it be internally or externally. And the flexibility that provides in terms of running a wide variety of applications very cost effectively is amazing. But it's not just pre-flighting and making sure that those resources are aligned with what you want to do. It's also proofing and making sure that what you've produced conforms to the requirements of the line of business. And those can be both legal requirements as well as marketing requirements and just pure fidelity requirements. Does the document look like what we want, or have we somehow messed up the data set so that what's coming out doesn't follow the rules that we wanted to set up for the document? PDF is critically important for doing that because it enables workflows that other traditional models for supporting transactional data have not allowed. Now, I should have labeled this non-white paper workflow because this is a look back into the past and not very far past. For many people, it's still the current. But the way that transactional output has been produced historically has been you pre-print a lot of paper with pretty stuff, then you overlay variable data on it, and in the insertion step, instead of those people getting their fingers cut up, you have the machine insert some pre-printed paper. The stuff that you always throw out first when you open your bills, right? Everybody loves that stuff. Well, the new and improved way of doing this, the state of the art, is the rolls of paper come in and they're just plain white paper. And so digitally, you mix the form, the variable data, and the inserts all as part of a composition or post-composition step before print. And this creates huge economies of scale. So the benefits include eliminating logistical problems like shortage, waste, and just the purchasing problems of, we didn't get the order to them in time, so we can't get the paper back to fulfill the thing we got to do in a week, right? Eliminate storage problems. You don't have to have as much real estate if you don't have to hold paper. And you don't have to do the environmental control stuff if you don't have to hold the paper, too. Also, you enable conditional content into your document that you wouldn't have had previously, and you simplify reprints. I'm sure a lot of you have encountered this problem where you get a letter and it's been raining and your letter is kind of now all runny and you can't read it. Yeah, so reprints are a really important problem to solve. But PDF helps to solve another problem, which is equipment utilization. Eliminating equipment or reducing its use or optimizing its use is really important. So, for example, there have been machines for a long time that actually rewind those big rolls of paper. But if you rewind it digitally, you don't need that machine anymore, and you can do it much faster. Just-in-time insertion control so that when you're faced with a lot of operational decisions about when to get your content inserted, you can now make this as a late-bound decision after composition. Where are we going to insert this stuff? Maybe my machine broke, maybe 3 of my machines broke, so I got to move that to another city that has the right kind of inserter. And those insertion controls are often done by barcoding, so that can be done as a late-bound element on the document. Taking content that would have been previously printed on cut sheet printers on a single sheet of paper, now you can print them 2 up, 3 up, 4 up on a single wide web of paper, and that increases your throughput dramatically. Not only are those machines more reliable, they're faster, and they cost less to print. So PDF is enabling these kinds of things today for a lot of forward-looking organizations. But going forward, we have the acronym SOUP here, PDF. It's really quite a great mathematical formula, huh? PDF, everybody knows PDF. Anybody familiar with JDF? Job, okay, good, all right. The job definition format. And ADF is the automated document factory. Sorry, getting lost in letters there. Duh. Okay, this is a great topology for the future because instead of devices and computers talking as point-to-point kind of conversations. It's more of a network thing, kind of like a Snapchat, right? Everybody loves Snapchat, except me. I don't do it, but I got a BlackBerry. That's the way that goes. But in this environment, PDF 2.0, with its capability to define finishing within the document, is absolutely critical, because now those documents can be distributed where they are best finished at the time, best printed at the time. And you create huge efficiencies, not only just for transactional documents, but other kinds of work that you want to mix into your production topology. Because realize transactional documents often have to fit very short time frames, typically the first week of a month, because they're trying to catch up from the last of the month's kind of closings. Other things, variable data like the CARE or PLAN, or some of those organizations will send you a solicitation for money, right? Well, they do those on specific days because they want it to hit your mail on a Monday or a Tuesday. So then there's this other block of time where the machines are going to sit idle unless you can put other content. And this model allows you to put books and other things, catalogs, into your workflow that traditionally you wouldn't have done. And this is the way the world is evolving to this model. It supports reprint automation. Reprints traditionally have been a really difficult thing, and PDF, because of that normalization, that color richness, all that good stuff, has enabled reprint automation, because you can now take that content. It doesn't have to go on a specific device. It can go through effectively a white paper workflow, but it can print on anything. It can print on a little desktop printer here, because you only got to print 100 pages out of 100,000 pages. And it gives you incredible flexibility. So that normalization process that I talked about as either a part of the composition or post-composition now allows you to bring all this content together and more effectively utilize your equipment. PDF is doing this today for forward-thinking organizations. All right, but it's not just about print. PDF, as we know, kind of worked its way into the economy de facto standard because it's so successful as a digital model for the desktop. Office has been overrun by PDF, right? But it's not just there. It's in organizations that have had these traditional silos of information. Now PDF allows those to be aggregated, federalized into a consistent view across the organization, so information flows more freely through an organization and is shared more readily. Now, for the consumer and the customer support representative for any organization, this is a real win, because they're both looking at the same content. Traditionally, that wasn't necessarily the case. A lot of customer service people would be looking at a screen of mainframe output. It's just as bad as you can imagine, just lines of data, sometimes no real context for what page a user might be looking at when they're looking at their statement. Now everybody's agreeing on the same thing, and what gets printed and what gets viewed are the same document. That is the power of PDF. Now, some people obviously need some help beyond what we get in printed form or visual form, so PDF leverages the tagging capabilities that have been in there for a long time and is extending them in newer versions of the PDF UA specification to allow for alternate renderings. This allows for automated readback, but not just that. Derivatives of that can then, because of the tagged content, can lead to Braille, to large text, to just purely audio form. Now, the future is bright for PDF because it is a holistic container. You can put a lot of stuff, dynamic content, into a PDF. So most of us use PDF in a fairly static form now. But there's no reason it has to be limited to that, because audio and video are capabilities of the PDF specification, as well as embedding content like spreadsheets. So the whole document becomes more actionable, more live, more useful, more relevant, more powerful. And that's the power of PDF in the transactional space. So that's the end of the presentation. If you've got some questions, I'd be happy to field them. And the graphics are amazing, aren't they? We got an all-star on our team who does this work.
You also demoed PDF as audio because the white slides have buzz.
Oh, nice, yeah. If you don't have a question, then you just have to sit there and look at me. I can ask questions. Any hockey fans? Who are the original 6?
Rangers, Bruins, Blackhawks, Sprague, yeah,
You got it. Wow, what an all-star group. That's amazing.
I had a question.
Hi, Jeff.
So you mentioned video in PDF files. It's something that the people with Adobe Acrobat perhaps are familiar with, the ability to insert a movie. But you're talking about video and PDF files in the output space.
Yeah, that's right.
Are there examples of this happening right now?
Well, we have put together some prototypes and demoed them to people, and as often with pioneering technologies like that, you get some wow, that's neat. And then they go back and try to figure out how to apply that, and those applications evolve more slowly. And there are parallel areas like AR, augmented reality, or extended reality, those kinds of things where people are expressing a lot of interest in making content like that actionable, but those evolve more slowly. So I think it's probably more of a next decade kind of thing as opposed to this decade. I think consolidation of the operational benefits of PDF is where we are right now. And then from there, as consumer tastes evolve in data information consumption, and they do evolve very quickly, right? I think we'll see more of those kinds of things come into play. Well, there are Braille printers. And obviously, they deal with relatively simplified versions of those documents because they don't display the graphics. So the tagged content in a PDF is generally text descriptions or the actual text of the content, and that plays well in the Braille space. The actual demand for Braille currently is small, right? Because there are other forms. Large text is the most popular form of alternate content. And there are some alternate forms of Braille. They're not Braille, obviously, but there are other models for those kind of embossed characters that are evolving in thought.
Question?
Yes, Tom.
So I imagine that there's a sense in which the trend lines for people receiving their statements and other similar information electronically, that's growing, that proportion of documents, I would guess.
Yes.
In the sense that both consumers are more ready to receive it that way.
Yes.
And of course, as you mentioned, there are good cost reasons why organizations would want to output the material this way.
Yeah.
Do you see, what's the status there? Is it, has electronic caught up to paper? Do you see electronic, do you see that banks perhaps will start to actually really genuinely send a lot less paper in the next maybe 5 years, maybe 10, maybe 20? How do you feel that trend is going to go?
Yeah, well, when you sign up for a new account, your bank will typically set you up so that you do not receive printed statements. And that if you want printed statements, you have to enable it. So right off the get-go, anybody signing up new, it faces this kind of barrier to getting printed output. It's not an insurmountable barrier. It's very simple. You just got to remember to click the box, but people often do not do that. Postal volumes in the last decade have fallen about 35%. And the trend line is very clear. It's about 2-3% decline year over year. Hard to project now when it hits the bottom, but the bottom might be pretty low depending on what happens with consumer consumption tastes. My kids probably never open an envelope. No, I take that back. My son opened an envelope the other day because he got something from a college, and he was like, wow, what's this? I've never gotten anything before, so he opened it, and then he threw it away. But yeah, so young people obviously are much more likely to take electronic content. And I would say the trend line is definitely more electronic content.
However, what Drew was just describing is true in the transaction world. The post office has done studies on direct mail where that mail has a much higher return on investment for the sender than e-delivery. So that sector of the community market is like you have something else growing.
Color is a really important factor, though, in getting adoption of any document. And that has been something that has evolved in the transactional space in the fairly recent past as well, because inkjet technology until the last 5 or 6 years was really quite nascent and expensive. And so the cost models for that have changed dramatically. And so a lot more content, a lot of statements and insurance policies and whatever are produced on inkjets. Yes?
Will this model consider the accessibility part? Because if you receive a PDF and you have some kind of disability and you have to run it through a screen reader, would the person needed it will need to request a special accommodation, or would be the bank, the insurance company already taking into consideration that that PDF will need to be accessible?
Well, it is a very straightforward process to take content that has been produced as transactional content, because it is very highly structured, and produce accessible content from that. Now, there's a little bit of setup work in doing that, but there's setup work in creating a transactional document anyway. And so that setup work involves defining the rules for tagging the content, because there is some subjectivity in how a person wants to actually have a document read back, right? What order? And a document, the way a transactional document is constructed, it may not be obvious from the ordering of the content on the page digitally how it should be read back. So there can be a little bit of setup work, but it's not extremely difficult by any means. It's straightforward.
So if I understand you correctly, so there's relatively few barriers on the large volume output side to creating accessible content.
Right, yes, that's correct. Yeah, on the transactional side is probably the easiest place to make content widely available as accessible content, because it is so uniformly structured.
Yeah, I noticed this came up in some sessions before, where people were wondering what about the accessibility of high volume content. And as Drew said, in my understanding, it's actually the easiest scenario.
Yep.
Because all the content is coming out of databases, essentially, very highly structured, as Drew said. It's very possible to leverage that situation to make sure that all these documents coming out are accessible. But that's something that, you know, if vendors vendors say otherwise, it's an interesting point to be able to put to them.
Yep.
Say, hey, wait a minute, you know, you're making all these things out of a single set of computer systems. If your software is capable of it, you know, then you can deal with this stuff right. If it's not capable of it, you have a problem with your software.
Yeah.
So
that's right. And there's an economics issue around accessible content, right? Which is, it really is a cost center for organizations, not so strongly revenue driven. So organizations have to balance, you know, when they consider producing accessible content, what is the cost benefit analysis of doing so? Now, where they're compelled to do that, for example, in the health space, that's one thing. Other spaces, they're not compelled to do that because they're private transactions. Yes?
You had mentioned dynamic content.
Yeah.
Could you explain that a little bit more? Because dynamic content I look as XFA, which I know was...
Oh, well, this is different from that. Yeah.
Okay.
This is basically rules-driven inclusion of content.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that content can be personalized. And kind of following on from the discussion of accessibility, there's a related area of content handling in the health space that's even more important, and that's redaction. Because HIPAA is a much more critical law in just the way enforcement is done these days, that making sure that information doesn't get in the wrong hands is very important. And so redaction applies very easily to PDF. And so what we see compared to accessibility redaction is a much more commonly sought after capability.